Today we are going to learn how to do some cardboard weaving. So these are the materials you're going to need. Either a thick piece of tag board or paper, or a cardboard. You can take this and recycle either a cracker box or a cereal box, pencil, scissors, a ruler, some tape, and then your yarn. So for your yarn, you can either choose your favorite colors, or you can even buy yarn that comes in different colors like this one. I like to cut my yarn into pieces that are just a little bit longer than my cardboard so that I have some fringe on the end. And then I have one piece that I leave really, really long. That's going to be the yarn that I stretch over my cardboard. So we're gonna start using the correct terms now. This is your loom, which is the frame where you do your weaving. This is your warp, which is the yarn that gets stretched over your loom. And then these are going to be your weft. These are the yarns that gets woven over and under, throughout your weaving. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to measure our loom with a ruler, making sure that it is even at the top. So I say even, Steven, make sure that your ruler is even with the edge of the top of your cardboard. You're gonna make marks every ½ inch all the way down the side of your cardboard. You're gonna do it to this side and this side. If you are a teacher and you wanna make this easier for maybe younger students, you could do something like this. I cut a bunch of rulers like this and I already marked it for my students. But if not, you can definitely use a ruler. Kids at home, you can have your parents help you. Use a pencil. I'm going to use a marker so it shows up on the screen, and every ½ inch you're going to make a mark. And you want these marks to be nice and even. You want them all to be the same size. And if by accident your ruler moves on you like this, make sure you make it even, Steven, at the top again. This is really important part of your weaving. The loom is something that you can reuse over and over and over again. So I'm gonna do the same thing to this side, make sure it's even at the top. And now I'm gonna make my marks here. The next thing you wanna do is you want to number your lines, because it is very important that you have the same amount of lines on both sides. So I'm going to number it starting at 1, working my way down, and I'll come over here starting at 1, working my way down. Now that I have my lines numbered 12 and 12, now I can go to the next step. The next step is to cut right on the lines. So imagine these are like teeth, and we need to make the separation between the teeth. So you're gonna cut right on the lines that you made, nice and carefully, not in between the lines, but right on the line. And you wanna make these cuts equal lengths. So you'll do this to both sides. Now that you have cut your numbers, you can see how they kind of can bend back and forth, and they kind of look like little teeth. So what we're going to do now is we are going to do the warp, which gets stretched over our loom. So imagine if these were teeth, our warp string is going to be the dental floss. And what do you do with dental floss? You put it in between your teeth. So I'm going to take my warp yarn, this is the extra long piece that you have, and I am going to put it right in the number 1 cut, right in that slit. Just as if it was dental floss, I'm going to slide it in, right in there. See how it's nice and snug? I will tape this to the back when I'm finished. I'm gonna go from my number 1 straight across to the other number 1 and go inside that tooth. And then I'm gonna go right next door to number 2. Go across the street, number 2, next door, across the street, next door, across the street, next door. If you're having trouble getting it into the cut, you can wiggle it around a little bit, that's okay. And I'm just going to keep doing the same thing. I go next door, across the street, next door, across the street. And this is also why it's important that you number your cuts. And I want to show you something. So you see how I have nothing on the back? That's important. So when you are doing your warp, you want to make sure you go next door, across the street. What I don't want to see you do is go in the back. I see a lot of students start to wrap around their board and they go to the back of their board. I call that the backyard. You do not want to go in the backyard. You want to stay in the front yard. So you go next door, across the street, next door, across the street. And you're going to do that until you get all the way down. And as you can see, I have some extra yarn left over. That's okay. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to tape both ends to the back. And cut the remaining yarn off. You can save this for later. Okay, now it is time to do your weaving, the weft. Like I mentioned, you can choose your favorite colors, or you can choose a yarn that switches and changes colors on its own. I'm going to begin with these warm colors, yellow, orange, and red. And there is 2 things you need to remember. Only 2. You need to remember over, under, over, under, over, under. That's the first one. The second thing you need to remember is the opposite. Under, over, under, over, under, over. So I'm going to take my loom and I'm going to turn it on its side, and you can start with whatever color you want. I will start with red, and you can start from either side. So I am going to take this yarn and I'm going to go over the brown one, and then I'm going to go under. I will lift and go under. So this yarn is going to go over, under, over, under, over, under until I reach the end. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to go over my warp, and then I lift up and I go under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, until I get all the way across. And when I get across, you see how I have just a little bit there and I have this long tail here. I want to pull it so that it's about the same on both sides. And now I'm going to push it up. Okay. Now I can take either the same red again, or I can now choose a different color. So I'll choose yellow. Now, this is where you need to remember to do the opposite. So if the red went over the brown, it went over, under, all the way across, then what I want to do here is the opposite. So instead of going over, just like my red, I'm going to go under. And I'm going to go under, over, all the way across. And again, once I reach the end, I'm going to pull it, and now I'm going to push it up. Every time you put one in, you push it up. And now I will get my orange string. If you see that your yarn is kind of fraying at the end or coming apart, you can just fold it over like this, and that way it won't come apart as you are weaving. So my yellow is under the warp. So now I'm going to go over the warp. I'm always doing the opposite of the last yarn. One more time, I'm going to show you. I always look and see what the last yarn did. The last yarn, which is the orange, is going over the brown. It's going over the warp. So my red is going to go under. It's always doing the opposite of the one that's right next to it. Now, this is very easy, as you can see. All you have to do is remember to go over, under, or under, over. But sometimes when things are so easy, it's so easy to make a mistake. And one of the biggest mistakes I see my students doing is they go over, under, and before you know it, they went over, 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 under, over, under, 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 over. And they don't realize it, but they made a mistake, okay? So if that happens, as you can see, okay, I went over, over, over 3 times. No big deal. It's so easy to fix it. Just pull it out to wherever that mistake is. And I see here is where I have my mistake. So I'm gonna pull it out to right there. And now I know where I need to fix it. So even if you make a mistake, boys and girls, it is a very easy mistake to fix. So you can continue with your same color choice, or you can start to make a new pattern. Here you might start to say, wow, I'm almost finished, but this is one thing that's very, very important. So you wanna make sure you wanna stop every few minutes, every few yarns or so, and you wanna take your fingers almost as if they were combs, and you're going to push it up. You see the difference between this and this? You want your weaving to be nice and tightly woven together so that you cannot pull them out. Every few yarns, make sure that you just push it right up against the top. That is going to secure your weft. Here are a few examples, and you can see how beautiful these are coming out. I love how this student is changing their pattern along the way. Here is a few more. This student is just about close to being finished. But again, you can see how these haven't been pushed down. So remember, you have to make sure that you push down as you go. So they still have some more room to add some more yarn. And now it's time to take it off of the loom. So this student had a hard time putting any more string in through here. So I'm just going to push this down so it's in the center of the loom, making it easier to remove from the loom. And I'm going to brush out the ends, and I'm going to trim one side, give it a little haircut, straight across. You can definitely recycle all of these pieces to do something in your sketchbook. And to this other side, I'm going to give it an angle. That's going to give it a really pretty look once I hang it. So I have it straight across here, and over here I have it kind of like an angle. Now it's time to flip it over and remove it from the loom. So you'll remove the pieces of tape. Once you have removed the tape, now you're going to pop it off the loom. So you're just going to carefully take the warp lines and pull them out from between the teeth, making sure you're not yanking them, you're just kind of popping them off the loom. And I like to make sure that I leave it laying on the table. Now I'm going to flip it and do the other side, carefully removing it. This cardboard, this loom can be used over and over and over again. So I'm going to set that aside. And now you have all these loops here and here with these two ends. So what I like to do is I like to take and decide which one's going to be the bottom. The bottom is going to be the angled side. So I pull this end just a little bit until that little loop gets hidden in. And I'm going to tie this to this loop. So this is really important. You want to make sure it is a nice sturdy knot. And then you double tie it just to ensure that it's not going anywhere. Okay, so it's nice and tight. And now I have my loops, okay? I have all these loops on the side with the one end still not tied. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the tied side down at the bottom, and now I'm going to start pulling on these loops. I am going to pull the bottom of the loop. So if this is the bottom, this is the top. If I pull the bottom of the loop, it's going to pull this one through. And I'm going to pull just until that warp disappears. You don't want to pull too tight because it will change the shape of your weaving. And now I'm going to do the same here. I'm pulling the bottom of the loop until this one disappears. Now I come to this side, and again, I'm pulling from the bottom of the loop, nice and gently, until that side disappears. And I'm gonna do this all the way up, very carefully. When I get to the top, I still have this one loose piece here. I'm going to just put it through this loop, and then I will continue pulling this one until it's tucked in. And now I pull this one, which will pull the last loop through. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this long yarn and I am going to tie it in a knot with the last yarn at the top. Tie it in a knot. So now that I've tied it in a knot, I can either cut this brown right here as well, or what I like to do is I like to loop it over and tie it in a knot over here so that I can hang it. So I find the last yarn over here, which is this green, and I'm gonna tie these two in a knot. Again, just like if you were tying your shoe, you take the two pieces and you do it one more time. Make sure your parents help you if you feel like you cannot get a tight enough knot, because this is really important. If they're not secure, it will come undone. And there you go. That is how you remove your cardboard weaving. I'm going to do one more just so that you can see.